Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Namaste, my dear friends. We have seen about the origin and the history, the lineage of the Yoga Parampara, the channel through which this yogic wisdom, this knowledge, this experience has been transferred right from the beginning of the creation until today, how it has been transferred through the unbroken lineage of varied practicing yogis and the yogacharyas is what we have seen. And I said that we also have a lot of archaeological evidences to prove that. Of course, the Kurukshetra is one which I quoted. Kurukshetra, which directly doesn't bear a witness for yoga, but it bear a witness for Mahabharata. So the scripture of Mahabharata is carrying the yogic aspect, the yogic scripture of Bhagavad Gita, so that way we can connect it. But also we have varied other archaeological evidences, mainly from the Indus Valley civilization of the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, that we have all heard a lot. But there, out of lot of artifacts that has been collected of the civilization, one of the oldest civilization the world have seen, the Indus Valley. You also have the coins and varied portraits that have been collected there, in which one of the most fascinating posture, which is of the Pashupati Nath. I said about the Natha Parampara of the yoga, that even today in the country of Nepal, where we see a lot of similarity between the Indian culture, the yogic culture, and Nepal have a lot of connectivity. So in Nepal you have the temple of Pashupati Nath. Pashupati, Pashu is the animal and Pati is the lord or the king of the animals. So even today Shiva is called Pashupati Natha. Natha, again the connection of the word with yoga parampara that I have told you. Badrinath, Kedarnath, Vishwanath. So all our temples of Shiva, if you see, this Natha, the name Natha, which is very much carried forward. And that's what you see in this wonderful seal which is seen as Pashupati Nath seal, which is seen, in which you see that there's a man like structure, but also with horns on top of him, and animals, the bull especially around him. So therefore, because of the bull, which is Nandi, and this man is having the horn, so Pashupati Nath is called as associated with Shiva. Therefore, there is a conclusion. So he is in a posture, sitting in a posture which is indicating the Ashwini Mudra, which is indicating the Siddhasana. So therefore, through that seal which is obtained from the Indus Valley civilization of the Harappa civilization, it is concluded that yoga is as old as that as well. Likewise, in various ancient temples, go all over India, various cave temples, various stone temples, everywhere you will see wonderful stone inscriptions of yoga, varied postures of yoga which have always been seen. So all these are bearing witness that this is as old as thousands of years old, and even today it has been carried forward by not just scriptures, not by book, not by just external scientific research, the internal research and the transformation the gurus were doing to the Sishyas. And in the recent times, how did we get this great science of yoga? So we need to give all credits to one of the greatest yogis of our recent times, Swami Vivekananda, and his guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, who lived a very simple yogic life. Predominantly Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga is what he practiced, but also the aspects of the Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga are very much seen there. So an integration of all the four streams is what Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa practiced, and he had transferred it, all that he did, and guided his disciple Narendranath Datta to become Swami Vivekananda. And it is Swami Vivekananda who sailed across to the United States of America in the year 1897 when he went to 1893 he went there to the United States, to the World Parliament of Religion, and 1897 he came back to India. Between these 4 years, when he stayed in the US mainly, whatever he had learned from his guru Sri Ramakrishna, whatever he practiced by traveling the length and breadth of India, right from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, even in Kanyakumari at the rock amidst the sea, he sat for 3 days and 3 nights and did intense penance, and he practiced. So whatever that he practiced, whatever that he experienced, all this yogic knowledge, when he went to the West, the US, he started teaching there, preaching there to his intimate disciples in various places, especially the Thousand Island Park and all places. And he wrote 4 books on Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga respectively. And these were the transcription of his lectures and also the written notes, and also he specifically wrote the commentary for Patanjali Yoga Sutra and based on the Gita and Brahma Sutra as well on these 4 yogas, and that brought a wonderful light over yoga, that threw a light of the science and experience of yoga not just to the Western world, to the entire world, even to India. After this, a great yogic renaissance which started happening. It is he who opened the doors of yoga to the entire world, who carried the ancient age-old tradition of Indian classical wisdom of yoga and made it available to the modern generation. So we owe a lot for Swami Vivekananda. When he came back to India and established the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission and also the Vedanta Society in the Western countries, he gave an emblem for this, which is a serpent which is completely around, and within the circle of the serpent you see the watery wavy river, in which beautiful lotus blossoms, and then the lotus leaves, where water doesn't touch. Even though it's floating on the water doesn't touch. And then you have the rising sun, and then you have a swan. All this were the integration of the 4 yogas. Vivekananda gave the rising sun as a symbol for the dawn of knowledge, which is Jnana Yoga, and then the serpent, which is the awakening of Kundalini power of Raja Yoga, which is indicated. The lotus, the blossoming of lotus, which was indicating the Bhakti Yoga, and the wavy waters indicating the Karma Yoga, and the swan, which is Paramatma, so Jivatma attaining the Paramatma. And why swan? Because they believe that the swan, the Hamsa Pakshi in those days, it is supposed to take, when you mix water and milk together, it leaves the water and takes the milk alone. Likewise, the Paramahamsa, the Paramatma, takes the good alone from the entire Jagat, and therefore Tanno Hamsa Prachodayat, he wrote there, and he gave the entire 4 streams of yoga as a means of one's own self-liberation, Atmano Mokshartam, and for the universal well-being, Jagat Hitaya Cha, is what Swami Vivekananda gave. And his organization, which he founded, Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission, predominantly started propagating all these 4 streams of yoga. Thousands and thousands of sannyasis and lay disciples started following all those, and even women sannyasis through the Sharda Mutt, and later many organizations inspired by Swami Vivekananda like the Vivekananda Kendra, S. Vyasa, the Yoga University, all are continuing these teachings of Swami Vivekananda until today and leading the way ahead. Next to Swami Vivekananda, it was Sri Aurobindo, who was a freedom fighter fighting for the Indian freedom, but then when he was in the jail for a long time in the Alipur case, that he had started meditating, and that's where he was hearing a divine voice, which he later gave credit to Swami Vivekananda. He said, it was the voice of Vivekananda which guided me in my meditation, and he brought out the entire aspects of yoga, the integral yoga, the secrets of Veda, the essays on Gita, and through all this literature, the Sri Aurobindo started teaching and preaching the Vedic system of yoga to the modern time, and his successor Sri Mother of Pondicherry and all his Paramparas started continuing this aspect of yoga as well. And later Swami Shivananda, again, who was a Himalayan giant, yogic giant, a monk of legendary values, who though was born in the deep south in Tamil Nadu at Pattamadai, was a medical doctor who lived in Malaysia and served, got a transformative life, and he came back to India and took sannyasa from Swami Vishwananda of the Sringeri lineage of the Dashanami sannyasa, and became Swami Shivananda Saraswati, and settled down at the Swargashram of Rishikesh, and started Shivananda Ashram, the Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Forest Academy that he started, and started making wonderful disciples, of whom Swami Satyananda Saraswati of Bihar School of Yoga, Swami Vishnudevananda, who was predominantly called as a flying monk or the flying sannyasi, who traveled across the globe teaching Shivananda's teachings of yoga. All those people started spreading Shivananda's way of yoga, the school of yoga. Similarly, the deep south we had Yogi Krishnamacharya, who was a royal yogic teacher for the princes and kings of Mysore, and he started his yoga shala at the Mysore palace, and he was teaching there, and he started the yogic career, the yogic teaching, the yogic sadhana at a very young age. He was already a great Vedic scholar, a scholar of Vedanta, and the Divya Prabandham of the lineage of the Alvars, that he went to Himalayas up to Manasarovara and learned the yogic tradition from Ram Mohan Brahmachari and came back, and he wanted to, he had heard about a yogic scripture called the Yoga Rahasyam, which is composed by Natha Muni, but it was not available. So he went to Alvar Tirunagari, the birthplace of Nammalvar, meditated there on Natha Muni and obtained the scripture which was lost hundreds of years back, rebrought it, obtained this Yoga Rahasyam, the secret of yoga. And Krishnamacharya started preaching, and there were 4 illustrious disciples of Krishnamacharya. Dr. B.K.S. Iyengar, the Yoga Bhishma Pitamaha, Padma Bhushan, Dr. B.K.S. Iyengar was his brother-in-law and predominant disciple, who took the lineage of Krishnamacharya to Maharashtra, to Pune, where he started Ramamani Iyengar Yoga Institute. And then we had Patabi Joyce, who continued the yoga lineage of Krishnamacharya as the Ashtanga Vinyasa. Vini Yoga was predominantly given by Krishnamacharya as a therapeutic tool. So he took the Vinyasa aspect of it and developed Vinyasa as nothing but the chain of yoga, which he developed and started teaching Ashtanga Vinyasa at Mysore, so the Ashtanga Yoga Institute. And then you had TKV Deshikachar, who is Krishnamacharya's son and successor, who continued the Krishnamacharya Yoga Institute, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram at Chennai. And fourth, Indra Devi, who was a foreigner, a lady who came to Krishnamacharya and learned from him, and who spread it across in the Western world. So through these 4 great yogic practitioners and teachers, great legendary yogacharyas, the 3 male and 1 female Indra Devi, Krishnamacharya's lineage continued worldwide, and today you know the contribution of all these people. And similarly in the north, the same time we had the first ever official yoga institute, the first ever registered official yoga institute came into existence at Mumbai, called the Yoga Institute Santa Cruz, wherein the Yogendra ji and then later Yogi Jayadev and Hamsa Jayadev ji and all these people are continuing the wonderful scientific teachings of yoga through the Yoga Institute at Mumbai, which recently celebrated its centenary celebration. So Yogendra ji continued the tradition of the Himalayas from Mumbai, Santa Cruz Yoga Institute. Similarly, almost parallelly same time, Swami Kuvalyananda, again continuing the tradition of Madhavanand from the Himalayas. Swami Kuvalyanand came to Lonavala in Mumbai, in Maharashtra, near to Pune, where he established Kaivalya Dhamma. The 4th pada of Patanjali Yoga Sutra is Kaivalya Pada. So he developed the Kaivalya Dhamma Institute there, and he was very scientific in temperament. He was a physical education teacher as well. So he brought in a lot of research aspects, scientific research of yoga. I would say the pioneer of scientific research into yoga was Swami Kuvalyanand, who started Kaivalya Dhamma and started propagating yoga in a systematic way from Kaivalya Dhamma. Similarly, far and wide, many teachers, many practitioners, all of them started, and the Vivekananda Kendra movement in the deep south in Kanyakumari in the 70s started propagating yoga as a socially relevant science. And there came this young engineer, mechanical engineer, who turned to be a scientist in NASA with wonderful aspiration questions. He came to deep south back to India from the US and approached his guru Eknathji Ranade, who transformed his life from being a mechanical engineer to a human engineer, that is Dr. H.R. Nagendra. And Dr. R. Nagaratna, a medical doctor who had done MBBS, MD, FRCP, Royal Fellow in the Edinburgh Medical School, and she had come back here to serve the people. But then Eknathji Ranade, the mastermind behind the Vivekananda Rock Memorial in Kanyakumari, who said there are many doctors who would start hospitals around, who would give all treatments and all, but you need to go deep into the reason for the Vyadi, the Adi, and set right. And that can be possible not just by modern medicine, not by allopathy, not by homeopathy and any of all those. They can all do that, but the root cause can be set right only by the yoga therapy is what he guided. And so he said we need to bring the science behind all this. Yoga works, but how? Right? That's what we need to know. So evidence-based scientific research is more important. We need to make yoga not just a science, but a socially relevant science as a task given by the great mastermind of Eknathji Ranade to this young scientific aspirant, this engineer, this NASA scientist, Dr. H.R. Nagendra, and to the medical doctor of Dr. Nagaratna. And they both went across this country, learned various aspects of yoga from various masters. It could be B.K. Iyengar ji, it could be Swami Kuvalyanand ji, it could be Shivananda tradition, it could be the Dhirendra Brahmachari, from all the people who lived, Ajit Kumar and all the people that they learned and came back and started doing scientific evidence-based research, randomized controlled research predominantly, by establishing the Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhana Samsthana at Prashanti Kutiram in Bangalore, which became a wonderful banyan tree, a university of its kind. Of course, Bihar School of Yoga was first of its kind, but later Swamiji withdraw the university and only continued to make it an ashram. And so the first ever credit of having the Yoga University was with S. Vyasa, which is Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhana Samsthana in Bangalore, where we all got trained in this lineage of Swami Vivekananda, Dr. Nagendraji, Dr. Nagaratna, Didi, and all wonderful masters of this wonderful institute. Raghuramji, Professor Subramanyamji, who is all teaching in this course, are also part of the faculty there. Legendary masters, Professor N.V.C. Swami, Mohanji, and all these people have been part of this wonderful yogic banyan tree, which gave its roots, its shoots to varied parts of the world. A scientific approach of yoga was more carried forward by this wonderful institute of S. Vyasa. That's how we see right from Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo, Swami Shivananda, Krishnamacharya, Yogendraji, Yogi Jayadev, and Krishnamacharya's disciples of B.K.S. Iyengar, Patabi Joyce, and T.K.V. Deshikacharya, Indra Devi, and Swami Kuvalyananda of Kaivalyadama, and again Shivananda's disciples of Swami Satyanand Saraswati, Swami Niranjanand Saraswati and the lineage, and Swami Vishnudevananji and his lineage of Shivananda Yoga, and all this wonderful yoga paramparas. In south, in Tamil Nadu, we had Vedatri Maharishi and varied other Mahatmas who carried forward all this lineage. Varied people, Entaro Mahanubhavalu, Antariki Vandanamu. There are innumerable, uncountable Mahatmas, yogis who are practicing. So yoga is not just which existed so long ago, it's existing even today by all these legendary masters. Maybe get inspired. Let's try to spend some time in exploring, getting to know about all these masters. In a short time, I just tried to summarize and comprise all their wonderful work, but we need to go into each one of them, read their work, what they have contributed, what is so special. Because Iyengar brought us the Iyengar style of yoga, which is using props to attain the perfection in therapy. So each person had their own unique contribution. The yoga therapy modules were wonderfully done through scientific research by S. Vyasa. Every institute had its own unique contribution, and even in this time, within the past say 2 decades, we have wonderful other institutes. The contribution of Art of Living by Sri Sri Ravi Shankar ji, by bringing the Sudarshan Kriya and Sri Sri Yoga has to be mentioned, and Baba Ramdev, who is living as a yoga maharishi, who has propagated yoga to every shore, every door, through his humble, simple teachings and adding Ayurveda to yoga. So he had a wonderful blend of Ayurveda and yoga that Baba Ramdev had made, and Patanjali Institute of Baba Ramdev has to be acknowledged, and Sadguru Jagi Vasev through the Isha Yoga, and wonderful masters. That's where we don't have scarcity of any yoga masters, any teachers. The parampara continues, and I'm sure out of all of you who are practicing in this course, many yogis are going to come in the future. Many yogacharyas are going to come as torch bearers of this lineage of yoga and continue this parampara. Vande Guru Parampara.